President Trump is about to see whether his bet on North Korea will pay off. Here now to talk about what's at stake in the historic summit is Congressman Michael McCaul of Texas. He's the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He joins us from Washington. Great to have you back, Congressman. Thank you so much for your time. Other than the historic photo op that this event will be, what do you need to see in this summit to be able to call it a success?
Well, very historic meeting. We've never had a sitting president sit down with anybody from the Kim dynasty. I think, the president has a lot of personal chemistry, and he's either going to bond really well or he's not. But I do like what Mike Pompeo, the secretary, said today about his optimism, the sense of progress that they have made. As you know, there are pre-negotiations that have taken place well up to this point. And he gave some sense of optimism in a country where I've always been rather skeptical. They've defied three presidencies, three previous administrations, and we have to view it with a sense of caution. But I think it's, you still want to, you don't fear to negotiate, you don't negotiate out of fear. I think this administration also, unlike the previous one, could walk away from the table if they couldn't get a good deal rather than just trying to get a deal.
Right. Has the president weakened his hand by feuding with his allies just ahead of the summit?
I know there's been a lot of talk about that. I have my own sort of position on tariffs and trade. However, I really don't think that's factoring into Kim Jong-un's head right now. I think he's looking at the maximum pressure campaign we put on his country in terms of sanctions, in terms of the ability to militarily strike his country. As Secretary Mattis told me, the purpose of the military is to get the diplomats in the room to do their job. And that's what's happened here. We put maximum pressure to the point where our Secretary of State has met with them, and now the President of the United States. It is a high-stakes game, but this is the closest I've seen to dismantling their nuclear capability.
Congressman, part of that pressure is potentially military. I mean, I think every American has to hope that this works and it goes well, but the president himself has said it might not. He might walk out. If that happens, and none of us want it to happen, if it happens, how big a step are we taking toward a military solution?
Well, we have to negotiate out of strength and not out of weakness, and I think that's what the president is doing. He has a lot of leverage going into these talks, but I think as Secretary Mattis has often said, that's an option we really prefer not to see play out. I think it would be sort of apocalyptic. It would light up the entire peninsula. And remember, we have over 20,000 American troops in South Korea, in addition to a lot of Americans that live there. So that's obviously the last thing you want to see in the last step. That is only done when the diplomats break down the process and can't negotiate a peaceful settlement.
Would the president have a stronger negotiating position if he walked in there within his back pocket an authorization to use military force resolution from the Congress?
I think it strengthens his hand. I know Lindsey Graham talked about this. I think that, this is the American people speaking on behalf of their representatives in the Congress, that we are going to authorize you to use military force if necessary. And the AUMF that we passed after 9/11 obviously wouldn't apply to North Korea. So I think it's a discussion that we should have.
A key problem for the U.S. in terms of security, of course, are the intercontinental ballistic missiles that could reach the United States. What do you need to see on this front, not only on ICBMs, though, but also on short-range missiles that could affect the U.S. allies in East Asia?
Well, this was a failure, in my opinion, in the Iran negotiations. We did not talk about their ballistic missile capability. I always question Secretary Kerry on Foreign Affairs, why aren't you negotiating this component? I view this as part of the biggest single threat to the homeland, their capability to deliver an ICBM and hit the continental United States with a miniaturized nuclear warhead. And I think that's something that has to be on the table when we talk about dismantling their nuclear weapons capability. That ICBM is part of their nuclear weapons capability. It is the device that delivers the nuclear warhead. I think it has to be a part of these talks.
And talking about the Iran nuclear deal, of course, President Trump withdrew the U.S. So does this put pressure on the president to come out with something that looks tougher than what President Obama achieved on the Iran nuclear deal?
Yeah, I think so. And I see a lot of differences between those two. This is an administration that's engaged with the Congress. The previous administration on Iran was not engaged with the Congress. In fact, they were fighting the Congress, so they knew they couldn't get it passed, so they did it as a plan of action rather than a treaty, because they knew the Senate wouldn't confirm it. And it's a very different feel here. Also, like I said, I think this president, as he demonstrated a couple weeks ago, is willing to walk away if it's going to be a bad deal. He wants a good deal, unlike what the Iran deal was.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. Congressman Michael McCaul, chairman of the Homeland Security Committee.